Imagine the following scene: a newly settled home, full of dreams and hope, is invaded by a force that knows no limits. It is not a hurricane, not a storm, it is much more destructive: the arrogance of those who think they own a space that does not belong to it. This story is not fiction. It is the cruel reality that many families face when the boundaries are trampled and respect forgotten. And today, you will know the moment a woman has decided that it is enough. Good night, dear listeners. I am Andre Branco, and it is with great satisfaction that I receive them here, on The Blood Ties, where we unveil the most intense stories that happen within the four walls of a home. Get ready, because Tatiana's journey will mess with your emotions and, perhaps, inspire you not to tolerate the intolerable. It all started as a modern fairy tale. Tatiana, a talented professional in the marketing business, married Maximo, a traditional family engineer 3 years ago. The problem? The first 2 years of this marriage were passed at the House of Sogros, a tight apartment where the mother-in-law, Irina, reigned absolute. From the first day, it was clear who was sending there. She dictated the meals, criticized the tidiness, disdaining Tatiana's clothes, and, worse of all, it belittled her work. For Irina, a respect woman should be at home, taking care of home and children, not showing off in an office between men. Maximum, in turn, tried to mediate fights with vague phrases about respect for the elders, but in the first elevation of his mother's voice, retreated like a soldier without armor. Tatiana knew this was not life. In silence, he began to keep every penny of his salary, planning an escape from that toxic environment. Maximum resisted at first. After all, it was easier to give in than to confront. But when she put the cards on the table with an ultimatum, he had no choice: either they changed there, or she would go alone. That's how they got a small but their apartment in a new building. Every detail was chosen with love, the walls painted in the colors she loved, the furniture that combined with her style, and, above all, a Persian, authentic and valuable rug, bought with the award of a successful project. It was more than an object, it was a symbol of freedom. The change should have been a fresh start, and for a while, it was. Without judges, no acid comments, without the feeling of being constantly watched. Maximum, free from maternal pressure, flourished. I laughed more, spoke more, it seemed finally alive. Tatiana breathed relieved, believing that the worst had been behind. But the illusion was short-lived. Irina did not accept that the son escaped from his control. It started with innocent visits, a cake here, a jam pot there, always without warning. Then he began to appear at absurd times, in the middle of an online meeting of Tatiana at night, when the couple was already in pajamas. The worst. Maximo had given a copy of the key to the mother by precaution, a gesture that at the time seemed harmless but would turn into an open door to hell. Tatiana tried, with all the education that her creation allowed her, to talk to her husband. It only asked for a notice, a little consideration. Maximo promised to talk to his mother, but the words were lost in the air. Meanwhile, Irina felt more and more comfortable. He entered with his dirty shoes, stirred the cabinets, rearranged the house as he owned, and still had the audacity to criticize Tatiana's plant vessels only gather dust, he said with disdain. Until the day came when patience has run out. It was a rainy Thursday. Tatiana, focused on preparing a crucial presentation for work, heard the door open without knocking, without bell. Irina entered as a tornado, with her muddy rubber boots, leaving a trail of dirt on the floor that had been cleaned in that same morning. "Behold, I arrived," he announced, as if it were the queen returning to her castle. Maximo was not, he was working, and Tatiana, seeing the dark marks spreading through her Persian rug, felt something crack inside him. "Irina, for God's sake, get your shoes. Here it's clean." The answer was a look of contempt. "Clean? A house has to be lived, it is not a museum," rocked the mother-in-law, advancing the room, further crushing dirt on the delicate fiber of the rug. It was then that Tatiana realized, it was no longer about the rug. It was about years of humiliation, of swallowed silences, of an authority that has never been recognized to him in his own life. With firm hands, no longer fear, but from a cold determination, she took the phone and dialed the number of police officer Dmitry Kuvanov, a fair man who had met a month earlier during an incident with noisy neighbors. "Official, here is Tatiana Filipova, from Constructors Street. I have an invader in my house. She is shouting, refusing to take dirty shoes, damaging my heritage. Can you come, please? The effect was immediate. Irina paled. Are you calling the police to your own family? No, Tatiana answered, with a calm that surprised her. I'm calling the police to a person who is disrespecting my house. In less than 5 minutes, the officer was at the door. Irina, realizing the severity of the situation, tried to make a victim, but the marks on the carpet were irrefutable proof of their arrogance. Dmitri heard both sides, recorded the incident and made it clear, having a key gives no one the right to act like a vandal. Family conflicts should be resolved in family, yes, he said, staring at Irina. But respect for the space of others is not negotiable. If the owners of the house ask to take off their shoes, you take it. If you ask to lower your voice, you download. Irina came out humiliated, throwing one last poisonous look before closing the door. And Tatiana, for the first time in years, felt something that had forgotten as it was, peace. Not the peace of submission, but the peace of those who finally put an end to years of abuse disguised as tradition. This story is not just about a difficult mother-in-law or a dirty rug. It is upon how far we are willing to bend to maintain appearances. It is about the day we decide that our home and our dignity are worth more than silence. And you, dear listener, how will you go to defend what is yours? While Tatiana arranged the last traces of the battle of that day, waiting for her husband to come from work, the apartment seemed to breathe relieved, as if the walls could finally straighten after years bent under the weight of expectations of others. When Maxim arrived, around 7 p.m., he did not need a look to realize something had changed. It was not just the tense expression of his wife or stubborn spots on the carpet, which resisted cleaning efforts as symbols of much greater resistance. It was Tatiana's posture. Raised. Unshakable. She told everything. Every word, every gesture, every second of that confrontation that would be unthinkable for many to be. And when he ended, he pointed to the marks on the floor. Here is proof that tolerance without limits becomes complicity. Maxim's reaction was predictable. First, the shock of knowing that the mother herself had been a reason to call the police, then the desperate attempts to soften, to find a compromise that no longer existed. Mom, she didn't want to, we can talk, give another chance. Her words stumbled on each other, as if he didn't believe them himself. And Tatiana, with a calm that scared to herself, cut her empty speech. Maxim, either her mother learns to respect this house, or loses the privilege of entering her. Without notice, without keys, without exception. He tried to argue. He spoke of family, tradition, the duty of honoring parents. But his voice failed. He betrayed the exhaustion of years swallowing frogs for the good of harmony. Because, deep down, Maxim was also tired. Tired of being the messenger of charges, the emotional hostage between two women he loved, one out of obligation, another by choice. And it was this tiredness that made him silence when the phone rang the next day. Across the line, Tatiana's father-in-law, with a tone that oscillated between caution and apology. Irina, she's very shaken with yesterday. It was not her intention to offend, she was only nervous about work. Tatiana heard in silence, without interrupting. There was no anger in his voice when he answered, just a firmness that left no room for misunderstandings. I understand. But from now on, things will be different. Visits only with appointment. Shoes at the entrance. And the rug. The professional cleaning account goes to those who dirty him. The father-in-law agreed with everything. Even he, always so absent in conflicts, seemed to have understood. This time, it was no joke. The presence of policeman Dmitri Viktorovich had left deeper marks than those of wine on the carpet. 2 weeks passed without a sign of Irina Stanislavovna. Until, on Sunday afternoon, the phone vibrated again. This time it was her. The voice was shaking, contained a mixture of wounded pride and the reluctant acceptance that for the first time in his life, he could not impose his will. Can I visit you Sunday? I will take a few pyro. Tatiana didn't smile, she didn't give in to the thrust of softening the tone. Of course, Irina Stanislavovna. We'll be waiting at 14H. Punctuality was not just a matter of education, it was a lesson. On the scheduled day, The mother-in-law arrived with the candy in her hands and the shoes at the entrance. He said softly, praised the apartment, as if only then he noted that he was always impeccable, apologized with measured words. Lunch has passed in a tense tranquility, such as silence after a storm, the still moist air of everything that has been said and not said. But it was a beginning. Or rather, a fresh start. Over time, visits have become less frequent, but more significant. Irina Stanislavovna has learned, at the expense of her own pride, that family is not synonymous with invasion. What love is not measured by keys on the door or criticism of the dining table, but for the respect that is built daily. Maxim, in turn, found that protecting his wife was not betraying his mother, but finally assuming her place as man and father. When the couple's first child was born, the grandmother was a careful but invited presence, without imposition, without judgments, within the boundaries that Tatiana, now mother, established with the same determination of 3 years earlier. The rug. It never got new again. Some spots have resisted all products, such as silent reminders that there are marks that only time and firmness can erase. Until, a year later, Tatiana replaced him. Not out of shame, but for choice. The old carpet gained a new home, the entrance of the house, where each footstep on it served as a subtle warning to those who arrived. Here, the rules are clear. 3 years have passed since the day when a call changed everything. Today, family lunches are not perfect, but they are civilized. Irina Stanislavovna asks before visiting, he takes slippers in her bag and, surprisingly, even praises her daughter-in-law's choices when she really thinks they should be praised. Maxim does not hide more behind his wife in conflict, he acts. And Tatiana? She looks at the past without regret, because she knows, this was the day when she understood that respect is not something asking. It is something that requires. Sometimes a single action is enough, a call, a complaint, or arrive said aloud to redefine an entire dynamic. Because there are people who only learn the real limits when they find out that exceeding them has consequences. And you? How many manch? Are you on your rug still willing to ignore?